never thought my life would turn into a headline you'd scroll past and say, "No way that really happened." But if you're watching this, maybe you're half curled up in bed, lost in a YouTube spiral, hoping to feel just a little less alone. Well, buckle up, because this is the story of the day. The HOA kidnapped my children. Yeah, you heard that right. And before you ask, I mean the Homeowners Association. Those supposed neighborhood peacekeepers who spend more time measuring the length of your grass than actually knowing your name. It was a Tuesday. In my head, Tuesdays are for leftover spaghetti and silent kitchen cleaning. I'm guessing yours too. I came home late, badge and briefcase in hand, thinking maybe the worst thing I'd see was a pile of homework on the table. Instead, there were blue and red lights spinning across my driveway, patrol cars lining the sidewalks, and half the neighborhood peeking out of their perfectly trimmed hedges to get a better look. I saw Ms. Parker, HOA president, her blonde highlights catching more attention than her shrill voice standing on my front lawn like she owned the place. I spotted 2 security guards. My heart skipped. Then, I heard my daughters shout, "Dad!" I dropped my briefcase. Papers scattered everywhere. My fists clenched so tightly I thought I'd crush my own keys. Instinct took over. I ran forward, shouting, "What's going on? Where are you taking my kids?" Ms. Parker didn't even blink. She stared at me with that signature Karen glare. "You've survived even one HOA annual meeting. You know the look. Sir, your children are in violation of our community's conduct code. We're temporarily removing them for their own safety and the neighborhood's peace. This is an official action approved by the board." She said that last bit with a flourish, like she'd just declared herself queen of suburbia. I swear every neighbor's phone was out, recording, but no one moved to help. The police officers barely looked at me, eyes flicking between their watch and Ms. Parker, as if this circus was just another Tuesday. My wife's voice broke through the chaos, crying, pleading, "They're just kids. You can't do this." But Ms. Parker just gestured to some stapled paperwork and muttered about neighborhood harmony clauses. Harmony, my ass. For a split second, I actually froze. Mia, federal judge. Used to hostile courtrooms and desperate defendants. But at that moment, I was just a dad, standing powerlessly in my own yard, watching strangers lead my kids down the driveway. They looked back, faces streaked with tears and confusion. That image will haunt me for the rest of my life. If you've ever felt small in your own home, crushed by someone who thinks a shiny badge lets them rule over you, drop me a comment. Seriously, I need to know it's not just me, that these things don't only happen in movies or weird corners of the internet. Because right then, I realized their real power wasn't in the bylaws, it was in making people feel helpless. I promised myself, standing among my scattered papers and shattered pride, that this wasn't over, not by a long shot. Would you have done something different? Or would you, like me, just stand there furious, terrified, and totally lost? Because that, right there, was the beginning of a war I never saw coming. The days after that night blurred together into a haze of phone calls, sleepless arguments, and headaches. I kept replaying the moment in my head, my daughter's terrified face, my wife's desperate cries, and me, the supposed man of the law, frozen on my own lawn. You ever notice how everyone has advice once your life falls apart? Call the cops. Sue the HOA. Get your story on the news. Trust me, I heard it all. But no one tells you what to do when you're not just fighting a system, you're fighting people who have the power to write the rules and break them whenever it suits them. Let me back up a minute. Maybe it's time you actually know who I am beyond the guy who lost his kids to a bunch of clipboard dictators. My name is Michael Evans. I'm a federal judge, which means I spend my days listening to liars and truth-tellers, weighing their stories, deciding which laws actually matter. People seem to forget judges are just people. If you cut us, we bleed. If you take our kids, we break. My wife, Natalie, has this laugh that makes even the grumpiest dog walkers on our block smile. She teaches first grade at the local elementary school. Yeah, talk about patience. My kids, Emma and Ty, are the kind of siblings who will fight over a single gummy bear and then 5 minutes later team up to see how many frogs they can sneak into the bathtub. We've lived in Willow Creek Estates, a leafy suburb just outside Cincinnati, for 6 years. The kind of place where the lawns are as smooth as putting greens and the mailboxes all match unless, God forbid, you choose the wrong shade of navy blue. When we first arrived, I thought we'd made it. The houses were tidy, the neighbors waved, and the community pool looked like something out of a magazine. But beneath that perfect surface, there's a certain tension here. The HOA, or the board, as they like to be called, runs things with all the subtlety of a firing squad, and leading that charge is Karen Parker. Now, if you've never met a real-life Karen, let me paint you a picture. Sharp voice, always overdressed, purse slung over one arm like a badge. Her hair bleached within an inch of its life, never moves. She cares about the neighborhood more than anyone, which is really just code for controlling it and weeding out anyone who doesn't fit her version of perfection. We once had a neighbor. Mr. Alvarez, nice guy, retired, loved to barbecue. One summer, his grandkids chalked a big rainbow on the sidewalk in front of his porch. The next day, HOA notices showed up on his door. Defacement of public property, Karen had called it. When he tried to argue, his pool privileges were suspended for 2 months. That's when I realized, people like Karen don't just enforce rules, they weaponize them. The HOA has rules for everything. The length of your grass, the number of holiday decorations you're allowed, even which bikes can be parked out front. They say it's for safety, but let's be honest, it's about control. So why did we stay? That's the million-dollar question. I'd like to say it was the good schools, the promise of security. Truth is, I thought I could keep my head down, that the rules didn't really apply to us. We paid our fees on time, smiled at board meetings. I even fixed a neighbor's fence just to keep the peace. Natalie had warned me, Michael, these people don't see you as one of them. Not really. They tolerate you until you make them uncomfortable. I brushed it off as paranoia. Turns out, your spouse's gut instinct is usually right. There'd been glares at the playground, awkward silences at block parties. The Evans family didn't quite fit the mold. Our skin was a different shade, our politics weren't silent. And then there's Karen, always watching. She'd drop passive-aggressive comments at meetings. Isn't it nice when families respect our traditions? Or, some people just don't understand the importance of community harmony. The message was always clear enough. You're welcome here, but only if you do things our way. If you've never lived somewhere like this, let me save you some heartache. It's less welcome to the neighborhood. More Stepford Wives meets Mean Girls. The night they took my kids, Natalie collapsed onto the living room floor, sobbing into her hands. I just stood there, swallowing acid, staring at the family photos on the mantel as if I could will my children back by sheer force of memory. We'd built this life, for them, for all of us, but under the surface, I could finally see the cracks. I thought my job was to uphold the law, to be civilized, to trust the process. But now, my family was gone because someone like Karen Parker decided we didn't belong. I started to realize, maybe following the rules meant losing everything I cared about. And maybe it was time to remember who I really was. Someone who never backs down from a fight worth having. If there was any justice left in Willow Creek, I was going to find it, no matter what it took. No matter what it took. They say every war starts with a spark. For us, it was a stupid email. That Thursday, as I shuffled through a million tabs on my laptop, legal research for work, appeals paperwork for the kids, Natalie called to me from the kitchen. You need to see this. She shoved her phone into my hands, open to a message sent from the Willow Creek board. It was addressed to residents, but we both knew exactly who they were talking about. Due to recurring safety violations by certain households, it began. The board has enacted stricter enforcement procedures. All actions are within our rights under Willow Creek community law. A list followed. Unattended play on the sidewalks. Use of non-approved bicycles in communal areas. Noise disturbances during community quiet hours. My kids, too. ATMA loves to chase Ty up and down the sidewalk after dinner. Always on those neon scooters Karen once described as a disgrace to the neighborhood aesthetic. All those times kids yelled or laughed outside, now twisted into evidence. Against us, it made my blood boil. Natalie's voice was brittle. They're framing our kids as troublemakers. And did you see this line? She pointed to a paragraph highlighted by the HOA. Repeated infractions may result in temporary removal of minors for educational intervention and community well-being. I stared at the screen, barely reading anymore. Mind racing. What did these people think this was juvenile detention dressed up as suburban daycare? Where were my children? Right now. Remedial supervision at an undisclosed community location. Karen had said like she was sending them off to military school. Funny how quickly your world can go from safe to sinister. We tried to call every number we had for the board, getting only voicemails and stock answers. We're not authorized to discuss specific children. All community board actions are final. I called the police, who'd shown up outside our house that night, and got the same stonewalling. HOA has jurisdiction on this. Civil matter, sir. I was losing my mind. On Friday, I went to the next HOA meeting alone, praying for even a sliver of decency. Instead, I walked into Karen presiding over a circle of smug faces. The place reeked of fresh coffee and sanctimony. I stood, fists shaking at my sides. Where are my kids? I want a direct answer. Now she didn't flinch. As per Section 7 of the Willow Creek Conduct Code, your children are temporarily under community supervision. You signed the agreement, Judge Evans. Judge, she shouldn't know. I never told her. Her smirk said she knew exactly what she was doing. People stared at the floor. Not a single soul would meet my eyes. Your children endangered themselves and the cohesion of our neighborhood. If you cannot handle responsibility, the board must step in. She said it like she was doing me a favor. All I remember is Natalie, gripping my hand as hard as she could that night as we sat in the dark at our kitchen table. The house was so quiet, it felt haunted. You start to pray for any sign of phone call, a knock, the sound of kids bickering over which show to watch. But nothing came. I looked at Natalie and said, I'm done letting Karen Parker play God. They want to make us the example. Fine, but I'm no one's scapegoat. If I have to go up against every last person on the board, that's exactly what I'll do. Because this wasn't just about us anymore. Willow Creek was full of people who'd been bullied into silence. I wasn't going to let my family go down without a fight. That night, I sent out a message, one that would soon change everything. And just like that, the real battle had begun. The message I sent that night was simple. Has anyone else been threatened or bullied by the Willow Creek HOA? I want to talk. I posted it everywhere, our local Facebook group, the neighborhood WhatsApp, even slipped paper notes into a few mailboxes after midnight while Natalie kept watch from the porch. My hands shook, adrenaline fizzing under my skin. For a split second, I wondered if anyone would respond. The next morning, I got my answer. The replies started as timid likes and cautious thumbs up. Then, I was fined $500 for planting the wrong color tulips. HOA threatened to kick out my son for having a drum set. My mother got a warning for walking her dog too early. She's 82. It was like they'd all just been waiting for someone to go first. I wasn't alone. Not even close. Over the next 2 days, I found myself fielding phone calls and late-night texts from people I used to just wave at on garbage day. We'd vent, share stories, even laugh about Karen's obsession with trash bins and kids' sidewalk chalk. But there was a pain under every joke. A mix of shame and anger everybody had bottled up for years. The most surprising text came from a name I didn't recognize, Barbara L. All of this started after Parker became president. I saved emails. I don't trust anyone, but I trust you. Meet me by the rose bushes, 8 p.m. I stared at the screen. I didn't know whether to feel like a secret agent or just a desperate dad, going along with anything that might bring my children home. That evening, when the cicadas started their nightly chorus, I crept around the side of the community pool. Barbara was already there, clutching a thick envelope and looking over her shoulder like she expected Karen to leap out of the shrubbery. She handed it to me, fast. Every dirty trick the board pulled for years. Intimidation, false fines. She turned them against anyone who disagreed. I flipped through the stack. Dozens of formal complaints, written testimony, actual minutes from private meetings. Why not take this to the police? I whispered. Barbara's lips curled. They tried, but Karen's brother-in-law is a city councilman, and half the board's best friends are on the zoning committee. Of course, so that's why my calls kept hitting brick walls. I thanked her and walked home, heart racing with something that was half dread and half hope. The evidence was real. Maybe big enough to shake them loose. That night, Natalie and I worked side by side, cataloging everything. She muttered, "This is bigger than us." I nodded. "We need to go public. News, lawyers, whatever it takes." Suddenly, my phone buzzed. A private number flashed. I froze. "Hello," a familiar, clipped voice. "Karen, you're making a mistake, Michael. Some rules are for your own good." My voice was ice. "You took my children. I'm coming for the truth." Silence, then a soft click. I stared into the darkness, pulse pounding. For the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope. They wanted us afraid. But now the neighborhood knew, and I knew one thing for sure. Karen Parker had picked a fight with the wrong family. Hope is a funny thing. It can charge. through you like wildfire 1 minute, and leave you shivering the next. After Karen's late-night call, Natalie and I barely slept. The house felt like a bunker, exhausted whispers, curtains drawn, the faintest hope that at any second we might hear our kids running up the steps yelling, "We're home." But Willow Creek nights stayed silent. The next morning, I went into action. I spent my lunch hour cold calling every local news desk in Cincinnati. Channel 5 hung up. Channel 6 said, "We'll look into it," but Channel 11 actually listened. I laid it out, breathless. I'm a parent. My kids were taken by our neighborhood HOA. I have evidence of misconduct. I'm begging you to hear us out. The reporter promised to call back that afternoon. By noon, our neighbors were stopping me at the mailbox, at the curb. It wasn't just support, they wanted to help. "If you're going public, I'm coming too," said Mr. Patel, whose daughter once had her Halloween decorations ripped down by the board. Even grumpy Mr. Conway, from 3 doors down, pulled me aside, voice soft. "They fined my wife for hanging wind chimes." No one's ever had the guts to stand up before. That night, Channel 11's van rolled onto our street with a giant satellite on top. More conspicuous than a UFO, a journalist named Alicia greeted me with that no-nonsense.com only true reporters have. She interviewed Natalie first, her voice breaking, but her spine straight. I showed Alicia Barbara's envelope of evidence, all the emails and minutes, every HOA dirty trick. She stared at it, eyebrows raised. "If this checks out, it'll make waves." As dusk fell, Alicia wrapped up. "We'll run the story for morning news," she promised. "By the way, do you have a message for your kids, if they see this?" My throat closed up for a second. I forced myself to look right into the camera lens. "Emma, Ty, Dad and Mom won't stop until you're home. We love you, and we're bringing you back." The next morning, the segment aired at 6:10 a.m., watched, barely breathing, as the headline blazed, "HOA in Suburban Nightmare. Parents Fight for Missing Kids." Footage of our neighborhood, shots of me and Natalie looking exhausted but determined. Then the reporter's voiceover walking through every piece of evidence Barbara gave me. Texts poured in. The school left a voicemail. "We want to help in any way we can." The mayor's office left a number. By noon, a second news van appeared. Then another. Before I knew it, the HOA sent out a frantic email, "Damage control. All misunderstandings and protecting community harmony." Karen was quoted. "We believe the board's actions are misunderstood. All protocols were followed." But the tide was turning. The real breakthrough came just after I poured my third coffee. My phone vibrated. A text from a blocked number. "Your children are safe. Stay by your phone. 7 p.m., you'll get directions." Natalie read it over, my shoulder, and almost collapsed. I held her up. I had no idea if it was a threat, a promise, or a trap. Asterisk. But we both knew one thing. Whatever happened next, we'd face it together. Because the world was watching. And maybe, just maybe, justice was coming home. At exactly 6:59 p.m., Natalie and I sat at the kitchen table, every light in the house burning like a beacon. My phone was clutched so tightly in my hand, my knuckles ached. Every tick of the clock was like a thunderclap. The kids' laughter echoed in my mind, turning the silence into something unbearable. Then the phone buzzed. An anonymous number. For half a second, I almost froze, but I answered on the second ring. A distorted voice, likely on a voice changer, hissed out, "Drive to the Willow Creek maintenance shed. Alone. No news vans, no police." Before I could shout questions, the call cut out. A quick text followed, just an address and the words 15 minutes, "Don't be late." Natalie gripped my arm. "You're not going alone." I looked at her. She was pale, but her jaw was set. "If it's a trap," she cut me off. "If you think I'll just sit here, you don't know me at all." For the first time in days, I almost smiled. We raced down the winding neighborhood streets, the sun melting into a bruised purple at the horizon. The maintenance shed sat at the far edge of Willow Creek, past the community pool and tennis courts, tucked behind overgrown hedges like something out of a bad spy movie. Every kid in this neighborhood knew to stay away. Rumor had it the HOA stored punishment supplies there. My hands trembled as we approached. A single security light flickered overhead. The shed door was slightly ajar, long shadows inside. "Natalie, stay close," I whispered. We pushed the door. Inside, the air smelled of old paint and gasoline. Stacked alongside road salt and pool chemicals were several folding chairs and sitting there, heads down, were Emma and Ty. For a fraction of a second, I couldn't breathe. All the panic and fury from the past week dissolved in an instant, dropped to my knees and pulled them both in, hardly registering the tears or the shaking. Natalie clung to them, all four of us in a tangle of desperate arms. Ty's voice was trembling. They said we couldn't leave, Dad. A lady with yellow hair brought us sandwiches. She said not to make noise. Emma sniffled. We missed you. We thought you were in trouble because of us. I held their faces. None of this is your fault. Not one bit. We love you. We love you so much. Then from the gloom, another figure stepped out. Barbara, the whistleblower. She pressed a set of keys into my hand. I couldn't watch them suffer anymore. Karen's going to blame me anyway. Her voice was rough but kind. Take them home, but be careful. The board is scared, and scared people do stupid things. As we rushed out, the night air tasted like freedom and fear all at once. I wanted to run, to never look back, but I knew this wasn't over. Willow Creek's secrets were too deep, and Karen Parker wasn't the type to give up control just because the story had broken. Back in our living room, safe but shaken, I called Alicia at Channel 11. The kids are back, but it isn't finished. There's more you need to see. Natalie bundled Emma and Ty onto the couch, wrapping them in blankets, holding tight like she could keep the world at bay through sheer force of love. I watched them and I knew this was victory, yes, but also our declaration. Because tomorrow, the real reckoning would begin, and this time, my family wouldn't be facing it alone. All night. Our phones buzzed, neighbors, reporters, strangers offering prayers and outrage in equal measure. I barely slept, half waiting for the glow of dawn, half watching the backyard, through slitted blinds, expecting Karen Parker to materialize with a new set of threats. But the house was finally full again. Pajamas, bunny slippers, whispered fears soothed by midnight cocoa. The tenderness of having Emma and Ty back still brought me to my knees, but the war wasn't over. When the sun finally rose, it did so with the weight of consequence. Within hours, Willow Creek was a circus. News vans clogged both ends of the street. Flashbulbs popped behind the laurel hedge while neighbors gathered in little knots, watching with a hunger that was part curiosity, part relief, part vindication. People I'd barely exchanged a word with pressed folded notes into my hand. Thank you. I'm sorry for not speaking out sooner. Natalie nodded toward a crowd at the edge of the lawn. You started something, Michael. Look at them. Alicia, the Channel 11 reporter, pulled us aside. Ready to make a statement? She asked. Her eyes glinted. She'd broken a story that might just topple a dynasty. We didn't rehearse. I simply went outside, Natalie's hand in mine, Emma, and Ty flanking us, and spoke. My family was targeted because we didn't fit a mold. Because we broke unwritten rules about what families must look like, sound like, believe in. The HOA tried to intimidate and silence us and to many others by abusing their power behind closed doors. But not anymore. We aren't leaving. We aren't hiding. No one here or anywhere should fear for their family's safety because of ego and cruelty disguised as order. This neighborhood belongs to all of us. Today marks a change. The crowd erupted. Neighbors who'd watched from windows for years exchanged high fives. Alicia squeezed my shoulder. Nice job, Judge. We spent the morning fielding interviews, questions, hugs from Mrs. Conway and Mr. Patel, even tearful apologies from parents who'd once avoided us on the playground. Social media exploded, our inboxes filled with stories, old board grievances, receipts for years of bullying. Around noon, I received a call from the mayor. I want to assure you, the city supports your family. We'll be opening a review into Willow Creek HOA's practices effective immediately. Natalie laughed. Actually laughed for the first time in weeks. Did you ever think a little side street like ours would make the news? It would have felt like a happy ending. Not for the envelope I found that afternoon. Someone had shoved it under our door. Inside was a single typed note. You may have won this round, but you don't know what's coming. Willow Creek belongs to us. No signature, but the perfume sharp and chemical clung to the page. Karen's warning. I handed it to Natalie, jaw tight. She won't stop. Not until she's lost everything. But my fear had changed shape. This time, I wasn't afraid of fighting back. And now, our story wasn't just news fodder, it was a call for justice. Echoing down every quiet, manicured street, locked under the bruising grip of pettiness and fear, I looked at my kids, saw the hope in their eyes. I knew we'd started something no one could stop anymore. Because Willow Creek was finally, truly, awake. The air felt heavy with the weight of the past as I walked through the familiar streets of Willow Creek, but today something seemed different. I decided to take a long walk to clear my head. With each step, I thought about the changes we were trying to make, how far we'd come, yet how far we still had to go. As I strolled past the vibrant homes, blooming gardens, and children playing, without a care in the world, I reminded myself that even small victories counted. I saw Mrs. Thompson chatting with some neighbors, her laughter ringing through the air. It struck me how alive the community felt again, despite the shadows that still lingered. But then, as I rounded the corner, my heart sank. There was Karen, standing on her front porch, arms crossed, her expression still bitter. The tension rose as I walked by, memories of our earlier confrontation flooding back. I hesitated for a moment, but then took a deep breath. "Hey Karen," I called out. Surprised by my own courage, she looked at me, her eyes narrowing slightly. "What do you want?" "I just wanted to say I'm sorry for how everything went down. I didn't mean for it to get so out of hand." I glanced away, feeling the knot in my stomach twist tighter. "I really want us to move forward, you know?" For a moment, there was silence. I could see her weighing my words, and then something shifted in her expression. "It wasn't just you, you know. We all lost something in this." That acknowledgement cracked the barrier between us. "I know. I just hope we can rebuild what we had, not just as neighbors, but as a community." As I continued my walk, I felt lighter. It was small, but that acknowledgement meant everything. Change doesn't happen overnight, and healing takes time. But today had been a step forward. When I returned home, I found Natalie in the kitchen, preparing dinner. Ty and Emma were drawing at the table, their chatter a soothing background. I caught Natalie's eye and smiled. "How was your day?" she asked, her voice warm and inviting. "I had a long walk and saw some familiar faces," I replied. I talked to Karen, her eyebrows lifted in surprise. "Really? How did that go?" "It was awkward, but I think we're making progress." She understands that we all feel the loss. Natalie nodded thoughtfully. "That's a big step. It's not easy to confront those things." I sat down at the table, watching Ty and Emma giggle as they compared their drawings. "I want to find a way to help everyone feel heard again. We need to reconnect and build those bridges. We can start with our own backyard," she suggested with a glimmer in her eye. "How about organizing a block party? Something fun to get everyone together and remind them of the good times and opportunity to reconnect." I loved the idea. "That's perfect. We can invite everyone, let them share stories, and maybe even address some of our issues casually." We spent the rest of the evening planning, dreaming up ways to incorporate games for the kids, food for everyone, and activities to foster connection. It felt good to work together, reigniting hope in a way we hadn't in a long time. As the sun began to set, casting a golden hue over our home, I felt optimistic. We had no magic potion to erase the pain, but we could create new memories, shapes of joy amidst the darker past. Together, as a family and a community, we would stand strong and start anew. After that night, the atmosphere in Willow Creek truly shifted. There were no more fearful whispers behind garden walls. No more anxious glances every time the doorbell rang. What remained was a sweet exhaustion, a sense of relief after the storm. The next days passed with a new rhythm. Emma returned to school, greeted by the security guard at the front post and the smiles of teachers who now felt empowered to speak about the importance of family safety. Ty even began biking around the neighborhood again, laughing with the neighbor kids, something that had seemed impossible just a month before. Natalie grew more active in community meetings, not as a victim anymore, but as a confident facilitator, encouraging neighbors to rewrite the community's rules with greater empathy. In our living room, I'd see her sketching on a whiteboard, drafting ideas about transparency, openness, and fair sanctions. It was as if she'd discovered new strength right in the middle of old wounds. Whenever I sat on the porch, Barbara would often walk by and wave. To me, she was the unsung hero. Neighbors who once kept silent now raised their voices, to even Mr. Conway, whose gruffness used to keep everyone at a distance, delivered a fiery speech at the monthly meeting. "There is no democracy without courage. There is no home without justice." Meanwhile, we received a growing number of support letters, not only from our neighborhood but also from families elsewhere fighting against abusive HOAs in their own communities. Suddenly, our story became inspiration fueling the spirits of people who'd long felt alone. But change, I realized, always brings new challenges. A small group once loyal to Karen still grumbled about order and tradition. There were whispers of new rules meant to restore the old, rigid power, but this time, their voices were openly challenged. No one was willing to live in fear again, and Karen. Since that short apology on our doorstep, she was rarely seen. We heard she'd resigned from every position. Her house looked empty. Who knows when or if she would ever truly seek forgiveness from the entire neighborhood. The turning point came at the Willow Creek General Assembly. Exactly a week after the official investigation was closed and the new, humane rules were passed. I stood before hundreds of neighbors no longer to complain, but simply to say thank you. My voice shook. We almost broke apart because we stayed silent. Today, we celebrate the courage to speak out. This neighborhood belongs to all of us, without exception. Emotion hung thick in the air. I saw Natalie holding Emma's and Ty's hands tightly. They now knew, whatever happened, their voices would be heard. For the first time, I was sure our wounds were becoming lessons, not just scars. That night, after the assembly, I sat on the couch and wrote the whole journey down in a journal for our children. And for anyone who might one day feel crushed by an unjust system, I wrote, justice sometimes moves slowly, but it always arrives if we're willing to endure and stand for one another. Willow Creek now finally lived up to its name, come alive, a place full of second chances. I looked out the window as house lights flickered out one by one and at last, knew, we had truly come home. A few weeks passed, and although old wounds still stung now and then, the changes in Willow Creek felt more and more real. The spring air carried a fresh scent, as if the whole neighborhood had decided to rearrange its soul. Most mornings, I'd find Ty and Emma playing in the small park with their new friends, their laughter blending with the chirping birds and the soft rush of wind. Utterly free from fear, Natalie threw herself into the Willow Creek restart team, a small group of residents committed to ensuring the new policies actually served every family. Sometimes I caught myself smiling as I watched her, so full of enthusiasm, sending out community surveys, organizing picnics, even setting up a toy swap every Saturday morning. If you'd told me months ago, my wife, who once hesitated to speak at meetings, would become the heart of our neighborhood, I'd never have believed it. Barbara and Mr. Conway stopped by often, sharing tea and stories. Between us grew a new kind of warmth, a friendship rooted in shared pain, but growing now in hope. Neighbors who had once kept their distance slowly opened up. Someone brought over a homemade cake, another offered to babysit if we ever needed it, and some simply waved hello, a little shy but determined. One evening, during a quiet walk, I spotted Karen from afar. She was planting bright flowers in the yard of her once lifeless house. Our eyes met for a split second and, this time there was no anger left, only exhaustion and perhaps, a trace of regret. She gave a slight nod and returned to her pots of color. I don't know if she truly changed, but just as our neighborhood did. Everyone deserves a second chance. News of Willow Creek's turning point continued to spread. Families and neighborhoods elsewhere began to talk, searching for ways out from under old oppressive systems. Messages found their way to my inbox. How do we start to speak up? Or any tips for building trust among neighbors? Touched, I replied to everyone because I know it's the small, frightened steps that spark real, lasting change. Nights in our home are now filled with laughter. Ty loves showing off his drawings and stories. Emma reads aloud everything she finds fascinating, from fairy tales to news clippings about Willow Creek. Sometimes Natalie and I simply lounge on the sofa together, soaking in the peace that was once so rare. I found myself remembering the bitterness and isolation of months past. But now those memories serve as reminders of how precious it is to be present, with family, with neighbors, within a community. On quiet nights, when everyone is asleep, I still slip out onto the porch. There are no anxious footsteps. No shadow of Karen lurking around the hedge. There's only the soft porch light, a gentle breeze, and the certainty that a home isn't just walls and a yard or a tall fence. It's the courage to care and to hold each other up through every storm. Willow Creek, like all of us, has rediscovered what it means to truly come home. This isn't the end of our story, but a new chapter, a place where everyone belongs, is heard, and feels safe. And however long I carry it in my heart, I know at last, here, we are part of something greater. Thank you, Willow Creek. We're ready to write the future together.